Hi, let's be real. The group that in 1964 started calling themselves Palestinians as if it was a real historical identity, and the rest of the world started really adopting in the 70s, they're not fucking real. They've simply taken a word that had been in use before but meant something entirely different and stolen it, appropriated it, as they do everything else. It would be like me claiming to be a backyardian, an identity that doesn't exist, but is based on a word that does exist, and then saying that because my name is similar to the word, I should be able to take over your backyard. I'm a backyardian after all. And that if you oppose the idea, you're a racist, a backyardophobe, and then dumbfuck students on college campuses and in my DMs on Instagram would tell me that I'm a colonizer for simply wanting to keep my backyard. I'm really proud of this analogy, but I digress. During the time of the British Mandate, everyone who lived in the region were referred to as Palestinian. The land had been renamed by the colonizing Romans after it had been stolen from the Jews as a kind of fuck you to the Israelites, meant to erase the Jewish connection to the region after the Roman suppression of the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135 CE. Before that, the land had been called alternatively either Israel or Judea or both for thousands of years prior. The invading horde chose the name Provincia Syria Palestina because the ancient Philistines, important, no relation to the modern day fake Palestinians, and, to add insult to injury, a non-Semitic people, were the enemies of the Israelites, so renaming the land after the Jews' adversaries was a big insulting joke. Luckily, their attempt at indigenous erasure could never work on the intelligentsia today. They are all about indigenous rights. I'm kidding. They all suck and buy the fictional propaganda. Fucking sigh, I guess. The funny thing is that after the name Provincia Syria Palestina evolved under the British into the new name Palestine, it was mostly Jews that called themselves Palestinians. For instance, the Jewish newspaper, now known as the Jerusalem Post, was, you guessed it, the Palestine Post. Actually, let's go through a panoply of different Palestinian stuff from before the word was stolen and this manufactured identity the Arabs created around the time of disco was created. Ready? We'll race through these. 1. The Palestine Symphony Orchestra, Jewish. 2. The Palestine Workers' Bank, Jewish. The Palestine Electric Corporation, Jewish. The FIFA-recognized Palestine football team, Jewish. The Palestine Maccabi Federation, Jewish. The Palestine Boxing Association, Jewish. The Palestine Brewery from my grandfather's hometown of Rishon LeZion long before we got Israel back, Jewish. The Palestine Economic Corporation, Jewish. The Palestine Potash Company, operating at the Dead Sea since 1929, Jewish. The Palestine Academy of Music, Jewish. The Palestine Hebrew Teachers Federation, would be weird if it was run by terrorists teaching Hebrew to all the little Jewish kids. The Palestine Cinematheque, Jewish. The Palestine Foundation Fund, established in 1920 and still in existence today, now known as Karen Hayesod, Jewish. And my personal favorite, Palestine Airways, which rape apologists, morons online post pictures of to prove that the modern fake concept of Palestine existed way back in the 30s and was, of course, fucking Jewish. Just wanted to lay some groundwork there. But to present the other side, to be fair and balanced, the Arabs also were... Oh no. Nope, I was wrong. The Arabs deliberately did not call themselves Palestinian because it was too Jewy. Ugh. So instead, they mostly claimed themselves as part of the broader Arab or Muslim world, going so far as to say that they were Arabs in Palestine to differentiate themselves from the gross Jewish Palestinians. Barf. To put it another way, the modern term, place, people, culture, history, and identity known as Palestinian is entirely manufactured. These Arabs are a bullshit political tool, an invented narrative that serves as a battering ram against Israel and the Jewish people. And spoiler alert, the world is eating it up because anti-Semitism is the fertilizer for this toxicity. Buckle the hell up, because I'm going to rip this horseshit narrative to shreds. Today, we explore the myth of the Palestinians. I'm Golan, and welcome to Jew Can't Handle the Truth. Let's give this episode some historical context by starting with the basics. Back in 1948, the Arab states went to war against the newly reborn state of Israel. Or, as the Boston Globe put it in their big old headline on the front page, Arabs invade Palestine in all caps. The article goes on to use the term Palestine interchangeably with the Holy Land, calling it Jewish over and over again. So everyone knew the truth about so-called Palestine, at least at one point. After the Arabs invaded, the Nazi-collaborating Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini, all but forced the Arab residents of Israel, aka Palestine, or wink wink, to get the hell out, promising a quick victory and a triumphant return to even bigger houses. You can watch my episode on the myth of the Nakba for more info, but let's cut to the chase. They lost, and the Arabs who ran away in order to come back triumphant couldn't. I'm feeling charitable today, so let's be kind and call those Arabs that ran away expecting all the Jews to die refugees. So what happened to them? As you can imagine, with those people being Arab and with a fuck ton of Arab states that had just invaded a peaceful country and failed miserably like the limp dicks that they were, and resulting in their own other Arab people being driven from their homes, they likely took all of them into other Arab countries with a hearty whoopsie and a strongly worded apology, right? No? No? I'm being told, no, they didn't do a damn thing to help those people. We'll get to why in a moment. But let's review what the Arab states did do. Let's start with who got one. Jordan annexed Judea and Samaria. That's right, to remind you, here we call it by its actual name of Judea and Samaria, not this West Bank of Jordan bullshit. And Egypt, they grabbed Gaza, so the Arabs controlled Judea and Samaria, as well as Gaza. Problem solved! And then I assume they established a Palestinian state in those two regions? And no, not a chance. For nearly 2 decades, these sister Arab nations left their own people to rot, truly keeping them corralled inside these territories, even while they were under other Arab rule. But why? These were the long-suffering Palestinians, ever since the time of the Cretaceous period. How could they not give them their own land? Easy, because those Arabs were never meant to thrive. They couldn't. That would ruin everything for them. The Arabs living in Jewish Palestine couldn't get their own homeland. Not that they deserved one. That's why the Arabs keep turning down a two-state solution, even today. That's why, as we are literally starting a ceasefire with the terrorists at the moment that I am recording this, the people in the street who have been chanting for months that they want a ceasefire just admitted that they don't want a ceasefire, that they just want to destroy Israel. So actually going through with a two-state solution would ruin that. And it's why, after this ceasefire was announced, everyone on their side, from journalists to politicians to children in the streets to literal mothers, only preach that they will do more October 7th and that their only goal is the destruction of Israel because it was never about getting their own country. Those Arabs in Jewish Palestine were meant to suffer, to fester, to become a perpetual thorn in Israel's side. They were simply a tool that allowed the rest of the world to swallow this genocidal nonsense whole, because blaming the Jews is always an easy option. These Arabs merely gave the anti-Semites a reason why, even if it was a fake one. Don't believe me? That's fine. After all, I'm a Zionist. Yeesh, you can see my shirt. It says all sorts of Jewy things. That can't be good. So let's try another tact. Would you believe the actual Arab leaders themselves? Because they openly denied the existence of a distinct Palestinian identity, too. In 1974, Syrian President Hafez al-Assad called Palestine nothing but southern Syria. In 1977, Zuhair Mohsen, a staunch terrorist and an executive committee member of the PLO, which I remind you stands for Palestinian Liberation Organization, said, and I quote, "The Palestinian people does not exist. The creation of a Palestinian state is only a means for continuing our struggle against the state of Israel for our Arab unity." In reality today, there is no difference between Jordanians, Palestinians, Syrians, and Lebanese, unquote. He admitted that the idea was a political ploy, stating, and again I quote, "Only for political and tactical reasons do we speak today about the existence of a Palestinian people, since Arab national interests demand that we posit the existence of a distinct, quote, Palestinian people, unquote, to oppose Zionism, unquote." They weren't even hiding the con, you fucking racist dipshits! There are so many quotes from Arab leaders saying that the Palestinian identity is fake, I could read them to you for the next hour and not run out. But let's move on. Let's talk about what the British Mandate for Palestine actually was, what it consisted of, where they stole this name from, remembering that all of this was historically Jewish land and that all of it had been promised to the Jews by the British Mandate for Palestine, consisting of more or less modern-day Israel, including Judea and Samaria and Gaza, as well as much of Jordan, then known as Transjordan. Not many people remember that part, so how did Israel end up with a mere toothpick of land, a sliver of its former self, and of what had been promised to the Jews? Well, the short answer is that the British are fucking assholes. Bloated, arrogant, duplicitous Winston Churchill decided in 1921 to take 77% of the land originally promised back to the Jews in the Balfour Declaration to have a sovereign state in their indigenous homeland, and handed it to Abdullah Hussein of the Hashemites to create Transjordan. The British did this to appease Arab leaders, as usual, but also so the Arabs would fight alongside them against the Ottoman Empire, so mostly protecting their own colonial interests. Because that's what actual colonization is, you Ivy League fucking morons, not when someone goes back home. Hint, hint for the future, in case it's on the test. So, the Brits gutted the Jewish state in a blatant betrayal, wrapped in political expediency and double-dealing, proving they cared more about keeping the Arabs happy than honoring their word to the Jews, which sounds awfully fucking familiar. But wait, you ask, what was that word you said? Hashemite? What's that? I will, as always, use their definition. Quote, "The Hashemite dynasty, tracing its lineage back to the Prophet Muhammad through his great-grandfather Hashim ibn Abd Manaf, were a royal family from the Hejaz region of Arabia." Unquote. Spoiler alert, they are the people that today call themselves Palestinians. They were brought to Transjordan from Arabia and indirectly into Jewish Palestine due to British political maneuvering. That stuff that is said now to us about don't move a population because that would be ethnic cleansing, that's what this was. It was about creating a political structure rather than reflecting any meaningful ethnic or cultural distinction amongst the Arab population in the region. In other words, if you're from Seattle, and you move to France, you don't get to say you're French. You're still just a Washingtonian living in Marseille. So to recap the quick history lesson, the Limeys sliced off over 75% of the Jewish state and handed it to the Hashemites, creating what we now call Jordan. I hope you heard that. Yes, the two-state solution already happened way back in 1921, 27 years before the reestablishment of the State of Israel in 1948. Bet you didn't hear about that shit, because whether they want to admit it or not, Jordan is a Palestinian state. Of course, acknowledging that would destroy the whole boo-hoo Free Palestine narrative the terrorists and their sympathizers have been shoveling down everyone's throat for decades. Side note, even the phrase Free Palestine was originally a Jewish Zionist rallying cry used to demand the Brits get the hell out of Jewish land during the Mandate era, especially as they slammed the doors on Jewish refugees fleeing the Holocaust with bullshit policies like the 1939 White Paper. Back then, Free Palestine meant kicking out the British and reestablishing Israel as a Jewish homeland, not the twisted anti-Zionist crap it's been hijacked to mean today. The phrase, for all of you chanting it as you praise murderers and cheer on the rape of little girls, was born out of Jewish liberation and survival. Fun fact. I hope that doesn't fuck with your desire to stamp out cultural appropriation or anything. Anyway, fast forward to today, and the Arab hypocrisy against their brethren is still jaw-dropping, almost as if it were by design. Palestinians in Lebanon, for instance, are treated like absolute garbage. They're banned from over 70 professions. That's 70, like medicine, law, engineering, architecture, teaching, journalism, accounting, etc., etc., etc. They can't own property. They can't access decent health care. They're confined to some of the worst camps you can imagine. They're made to rely on UNRWA, remember them, the terrorists who make sure all Palestinians are refugees against the actual definition of the word. How purposeful the Palestinian treatment in Lebanon is. It's such a coincidence how them being mistreated by their fellow Arabs totally aligns with the goal of hurting the Jews. Weird. Lebanon has used the Palestinians as scapegoats for their internal failures, all while spewing anti-Israel bullshit to deflect attention. What about in Jordan, aka actual Arab Palestine, as we just talked about? Well, while some Palestinians were granted citizenship, and 1.5 million of them had that citizenship stripped away again in 1988, nearly 500,000 of them residing in Jordan were never given citizenship of any kind. And even the ones that do have Jordanian citizenship are still labeled as refugees, as are their children, and their children, and their children for fucking ever. And lest we forget the infamous Black September massacre in 1970, when King Hussein decided he'd had enough of what he called Palestinian violence and killed thousands of them. According to Palestinian sources, 15,000 poor innocent people were killed, including women and children. And since we know they lie about everything, that means that the actual number that has now been proven was about 1/3 of that and was almost entirely combatants. I wish I was making that part up. It's just what they've always done. Anyway, Jordan, the country literally sitting on Jewish ancestral land, treats the so-called Palestinians like trash, despite being the same people they are. Why? You know why. Say it with me. To fuck over Israel and the Jews. That's right. Very, very good. Very good. In Syria, Assad bombed entire Palestinian refugee camps into oblivion while also starving and slaughtering them. In Kuwait, 400,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed from the country after the PLO backed Saddam Hussein. Actual ethnic cleansing, not the thing they call ethnic cleansing today. Egypt, Gaza's neighbor, have gone so far as to say that if even one Palestinian makes it into their territory, they will cancel the peace treaty with Israel that's been in place since 1979. Whoa, they've kept their Rafah crossing tightly sealed, trapping the Gazans in Gaza while blaming Israel for Gaza's woes. Again, a means to an end, and an obvious one at that. Here's the brutal truth. Arab leaders don't give a fuck about the Palestinians, or rather, they do, but only if they can be used to turn people against Israel and against the Jews. Palestinian suffering is a motherfucking feature, not a bug. It's all part of the plan to keep this fake Palestinian identity alive in order to cudgel Israel day in and day out. They've been turned into eternal victims. Cue all the violins, not for their sake, but to weaponize their misery against Israel. The, quote, Palestinian cause is the most overhyped scam in modern history. It's not about liberation or self-determination. It's about erasing Israel from the map, plain and simple. From the river to the sea. The other Arabs have kept the Arabs living in Jewish Palestine in perpetual limbo for decades, refusing to integrate them because if they turn into a stable, successful Arab population elsewhere, it would undermine the narrative. And also, side effect time, dry up the billions of dollars that are sent their way thanks to this crass, disgusting, and false political invention. And what of all that money? The money that this made-up identity facilitates. Billions in aid that's either slipped into corrupt leaders' pockets or funneled directly into terrorism. Hamas, the poster children for this insanity, take that cash and brag on video about building rockets instead of schools, pulling up water pipes in order to turn them into missiles, etc., etc. Meanwhile, all the Arab leaders who know that Arab Palestine isn't a real place sit back and shrug, happy to let the charade continue as long as it screws over Israel. You know what? I'll go a step further. They don't just shrug. They make sure they keep financing aforementioned UNRWA to make sure that they keep teaching in these schools to continue brainwashing the entire population to make them willing to be cannon fodder in this fight against the Hebrews. And the rest of the world? Sadly, they buy it hook, line, and sinker because it's wrapped up in anti-Semitic propaganda that's been perfected for centuries. They fund it, they cheer for it, and they justify it because Jew hatred Just makes it all so damn convenient. Interestingly, the Abraham Accords were a game changer. Countries like the UAE and Bahrain saw through the bullshit and decided to put their own interests first and stop pretending like they needed this manufactured group of people to take over Israel before they could open up trade lines or whatever. Normalizing relations with the Jewish state wasn't just a bold move, it was a massive middle finger to all the fake solidarity they'd been forced to show the Palestinians. Of course, the Palestinian leadership threw a big tantrum, accusing these nations of betrayal. But can you blame the more progressive Arabs? Human beings get fucked over in this world. Even if what they were saying was true, everyone else who had it happen to them moved on. The amount of refugees that were created by countries that were being established during the same period amounts to like 40 million people. And these are the only ones who are still whining about it and passing along their grievance bullshit to their children and grandchildren, as if they have any idea what even was going on back then, except what they're being told through the lies of a group like UNRWA. The Arabs who wanted to do business with Startup Nation were tired of watching these fake Palestinians reject every peace offer, embrace terrorism, and cling to this fantasy of annihilating Israel. The good ones just wanted some tech innovations from the country that's invented most of them so far. So their patience finally ran out, and they said enough already. Things were moving in the right direction until a new administration came in and abandoned this successful model, but I don't want to talk about that right now. That's not what this is about. That's another story. We'll do a whole episode about that, I'm sure, at some point. Anyway, after October 7th and during the subsequent war, where were the Arab nations then? Did they take in their Arab brothers and sisters at that point? No. That would have left only fighters in Gaza, or nobody. That would have reduced the body count. They needed women and children, even though about 20,000 of the people that have died that were fighting age men are now being labeled as women and children. So I don't know. It's all Benjamin Button and transgender in Gaza, apparently. Egypt went so far as to build new walls along the Rafah crossing, just in case. Qatar, which has funded Hamas for years, basically causing all of this in the first place, acted like the world's shadiest sugar daddy, pretending to care but doing jack shit to actually help the Gazans. None of the Palestine lie-perpetuating Arab countries lifted a single finger to help them, or to stop the war, or to get the hostages back, or to stop Hamas, or to stop the rockets coming into Israel from all sides every day. To them, the Palestinians were and are expendable, as they provide a means to hate the Jews. Their suffering is a tool. Their lives are a bargaining chip in the Arabs' relentless war against Israel. And the West still cry for the Palestinians without understanding who they are or why they are there to begin with. So let's call this what it is. The Palestinians are pawns in a sick and twisted game orchestrated by their Arab so-called brothers. Their suffering is deliberate, their misery manufactured. The goal isn't to help them, it's to use them as human weapons and human shields to delegitimize and destroy Israel. So what's the solution? To end the charade. To move these Arabs who falsely call themselves Palestinians out into the vast resource-rich Arab countries that are more than capable of absorbing them. As we discussed, Jordan is already a Palestinian state, so yalla. And if not there, there's plenty of room across the rest of the Arab world to resettle these people and give them real opportunities. I don't care what happens to them after that, as they're not our responsibility. I just want them out of our homeland and to stop being a reason that people hate the Jews because they're too stupid to do their own research. I also would love it if they could stop trying to kill us all the fucking time. So here's my humanitarian plea. Let's stop using these people. Let's stop perpetuating the myth that is hurting them. Let's stop their endless cycle of suffering. It's time to dismantle this bullshit narrative and focus on building a future instead of clinging to lies so you can get anti-Semites to cheer on baby killers. The next time someone tries to sell you on the lie of the oppressed Palestinians, remember, there is no such thing. But that the Arabs in Jewish Palestine, their oppression is by design. And the designers are their own governmental and religious leaders, their allies, and their family members. It's time to put a stop to it. Thank you. as always, for joining me here and allowing me to be a resource for you. I hope this was helpful and informative. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Until next time, I'm Golan, and this has been Jew Can't Handle the Truth.